Yeah, I'm glad you made it, Stephen. Yeah, we would have gone on without you, but it would not have been the same. Um,
Ah,
well, thank you everyone for being here today and for being a part of this office hours. Of course, the theme of today's session is how to run a successful letter writing campaign. This is something that Strong Towns Grand Rapids has been able to do. I think we've written at least one article, maybe two articles about it so far at Strong Towns. There's a lot to learn, and I'm really grateful to have Anna Carley here to help lead us through this process and through this presentation. Um, Yes, as a reminder, like this will be uploaded to the YouTube playlist later, along with all of our other office hours. And so, yeah, we'll be here and available for you and for other members of your team to rewatch later. With that, Anna, I'd like to turn it over to you and just really, this is the first time you and I have met in person, and I guess, in person over Zoom. But so would you mind just kind of introducing yourself? And yeah, it's just before we kind of get into the formal part, just tell us a little bit about yourself and about Strong Towns Grand Rapids.
yeah. So I'm Anna Carley. My husband is Andrew. He's the one who kind of pulled me into all of this
Mhm.
about 2 years ago. So I was not as interested in strong towns movement and like urbanism as much as him. I participate in urbanism with a lot of biking. We take public transit and that sort of stuff. But I was not a active advocate at the time. So we kind of got involved in the first initial startings of Strong Towns Grand Rapids about 2 years ago, and it's kind of just snowballed since. And I'm the executive director, keeping things running over here. So
That's awesome. And you were just able to meet Chuck was it last week in Michigan?
yes, yep, he was in talking around with some of the local developers at some of the newer developments, from what I understand. I saw a couple things on LinkedIn about it this morning. So hopefully that gets the ball turning in some of the bigger developers' minds around here of, what kind of possibilities of infill we could have. I
Okay.
think I'm starting to see that quite a bit more now with some of the other housing advocates in the Grand Rapids area. So
Okay. Yeah. Well, we have looked to Strong Towns Grand Rapids as an inspiration and as a model in a lot of different areas. One of which, and of course, that's the theme of today, is on running a successful letter writing campaign. So, with that, if you're okay with that, I'll turn it over to you. Let me make sure that you have screen sharing possibilities. I'm gonna make you the co-host. And then we'll kind of turn it over to you, and then we'll have a time for Q&A afterwards. So thank you, Anna, for kind of leading us through
yeah.
this process.
All right. Let's make sure. Share. There we go. Look. All right. Do you see the slideshow?
Yeah, we
Turn it
can see
down.
it great.
Okay. So I have this document here. Same information that's on the slideshow. It just might be more usable for you guys if you're going through writing a letter
Oh, that's helpful.
and some of the key items that we're going to talk about. So I'm going to presentation mode here. So successful letter writing campaign. Um, these are kind of the 5 things that I've been kind of setting as a standard for our group when we want to address an issue that comes up through civil discourse or that sort of stuff. And so we kind of identify the position you intend to take. We create some supporting arguments around that, and then address the concerns against the position. And then we kind of set our standard for other people that are going to use our letter to make sure it fits within our guidelines. And then it's advocate action. Advocate action is the last one there. And that one's kind of the key one of spreading the message out there. So identifying the position you intend to take. So first couple steps to getting a good letter written is you got to figure out what kind of time frame we're working with here. Do you have a week? Do you have a month? When is it going to be due by? Because a lot of these are, there's going to be a certain cutoff date for civic engagement to let that input be heard. So you got to know that on the issue that you're kind of working on. And then the next step would be you need to understand that issue. So you gotta do a little bit of a deep dive, do some research. Maybe you're an expert already on it, or you know some experts. That's another way you can do it, is pull in some experts and get their opinion on it, figure out your stance on the issue, and then also figure out the arguments against your issue. Because that's the other flip side of it, is a lot of the decision makers that you're going to be sending letters to, they're going to have to weigh both sides. So if you can have an argument for your side, and then you can counterbalance whatever arguments that you can think of against your position, that's a lot easier to sway the decision makers if you can come up with some counterpoints to, well, maybe they don't want this. Well, why wouldn't they want this? Or what benefits come about from changing the position? So those are the first current starting points there. The next step would be finding some documentation, maybe existing policies, laws that are already in place that support your position. So, maybe the master plan. That one was one we kind of looked at a lot in Grand Rapids, was the community master plan and some of the specific plans that came out of the master plan from 2002. So we had a bicycle action plan in like 2005 that said, we're going to need 100 miles of bike lanes in Grand Rapids. So using those sort of documents that are out there in the local governments to support your position, that way you can point to those and go, hey, look, according to this thing that we did back in time, we need to continue to support that work on whatever kind of policy you're trying to advocate for. And then the last point here is just understanding that decision maker's viewpoint. Get to know that person. Maybe it's a group of people. Figure out what their interests are, how much sway they can have over the issue. Because there's no point in trying to argue or advocate for an issue if they're not the right decision maker to put some pressure on this issue. So those are the first 5 bullet points to go with the first step of getting a good campaign going, is understand the issue, understand the decision maker, and then figure out how you want to set up your argument for it. Next step here, creating some supporting arguments. So now we've kind of established what we're doing, how we're going to do it. We're going to start working on the arguments for your position. So using the existing documents, that's kind of the set your argument up in the framework of what exists. So using those supporting documents of maybe it's a master plan, maybe it's a specific plan, or some guidelines that have been adopted or that sort of thing, using those to your position to really strengthen up and build on fact versus feeling is really going to help solidify your argument when you come to just writing the letter. Let's see. And then again, here I touched on kind of, oftentimes with these sort of, when you're creating a letter, there are going to be public input sessions or something like that. So oftentimes a lot of the arguments come up that are, we feel or I feel. They're feel arguments more so than, well, fact or figure is going to say this. And we've found that public agents respond a lot better to just facts versus a bunch of feelings. So like the zoning reforms in Grand Rapids recently, a lot of the opposition to the amendments that were going to be done, it was simply just, well, we feel like that might take away a lot of parking, or that might take away a lot of parking for these businesses, and we feel like that might be a bad solution for this. And versus looking at whatever studies you can find for parking studies, they're everywhere, and it's a well-researched topic, so you can go find some facts, find some figures, throw it in there to help support your argument throughout the letter. Next step here would be just addressing that concern against your position. So the counterpoints, we would like to really kind of look at these and see if we can build up a little bit of a buffer against some of these. Because sometimes if you don't build that into your initial letter, you're not going to have a chance to respond to whatever someone else might send in through a letter campaign or a public input session. So it's kind of important to really build those into your argument. That way it is stated out there, because you don't often have another chance for another input session. And then setting a standard for the other people, and for others, I mean like other members of your community that you're trying to organize with. So this is setting the standard for your members with your campaign. Use accurate factual statements. We like to fact check ourselves, make sure we're staying true to what information we found or the facts of the matter. Always be nice with the words you're using in the letter, and then keep the message positive. You don't have to be resistant to every change. There's always a way to spin a change into a positive manner. It's just making sure you keep that messaging positive throughout the tone of the letter. That way people aren't reading it like, oh, this is just a slam campaign or whatever. And then the last part here, advocate action. So this is where you're going to start promoting it to other like-minded individuals. We found success with just posting on our webpage. We have enough traffic there that locally we can get some good community engagement. So quality good community engagement looks like, you're going to have 50 emails of similar format from different emails, and not just like one email with a collective bunch of signatures on it. I mean, you can go that way. We haven't done it, but it looks a lot nicer to say, oh, we got 90 emails saying, don't do this because XYZ, versus the next point here is change.org petition. We found that they're easy for people. They're low engagement for people to do, but we haven't seen that much success using that type of like distribution or emailing system. So, and then the last fact here, just kind of sending out a little pre-warning to some of the decision makers. So if you're gonna like maybe slam your planning department with 90 some emails, maybe give them a little heads up just to kind of expect that. That way they're not suddenly bogged down with a bunch of emails and maybe they only have one person that's staffed to do that stuff. So just kind of send them out a little bit of a pre-warning. If you think this is going to get a lot of traction, would be a good practice to do. So quick example here of one we did. So this is on our webpage, down in the archive here. So this is for the zoning changes in 2024. We kind of did a precursor blog post, I suppose, on why people should support the zoning changes. We also have our how to engage the city commission. So we have a little how to send an email to the right people there. And then we have our example letter here. So we kind of took this one. We stated support for the issue at hand on blah, 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 the date. And then we kind of go through each point of one of our members who's very knowledgeable in the Grand Rapids zoning went through and organized this in a way for each point. We had this is one of the things they were going to change in the zoning. And then we went into saying, this can help with the homeless crisis that's in Grand Rapids. You can get people into housing by changing this section of the zoning here. So it kind of goes in through each little point of things that were going to get contested. We have parking requirements down here. That was one of the things that they were going to change quite a lot. People weren't super happy about that. But then here we have the Victoria Transport Policy Institute study with some numbers here, and kind of bringing it back to some numbers and facts and saying why we should be supporting parking, the elimination of parking requirements. So, and then we have Housing Next here in Grand Rapids have started really just picking up this snowball effect of pushing a lot of data towards our city and city government. So we've kind of leaned on them for a lot of documentation on the housing crisis in Grand Rapids. So we've cited their study here. And so that kind of brings it back to, using other local advocates and industry experts to say, hey, look, they got the research. We also know what needs to happen here. Let's push that, continue to push that support at the city level. So and then I think time for some questions and discussion. So open it up to the floor.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much, Anna. That's really helpful. There were a number of things in there that I hadn't really thought about before, and then the one I just mentioned in the chat is like giving them a heads up, like that they're going to be receiving 90 emails, and here's why, and here's a group behind it. It just seems polite to me. It's not one that I had really considered before. Um, you're still sharing your screen, which I'm fine with, but like,
Yeah, if people want to read it, that's fine.
gotcha. Yep. Yeah, and then Carlos had an interesting thought here in the chat as well. He said we have used a hybrid version where we ask people to sign the open letter, but also add their own comments, and we submit the letter with comments, and it ends up being a 20-page letter um, as a single letter. It's much lighter ask to simply write a few sentences in an online form. Is that anything? Have you ever experimented with that, Anna?
We have not, mostly because I think depending on how you do it, that can get quite burdensome on a local conversation, depending on how much level of time commitment you want to do, if you're going to format that, or not sure how they were exactly putting that together, but we have not experimented with that
Okay.
approach. So
I think as like someone who sits in all of these meetings all the time, I think one of the downsides is that is like they'll read it as one letter that so many people signed, similar to a change.org petition, versus having a bunch of individual letters. So one of the reasons why like our letter campaign, well, our numbers are relatively like small compared to some change petitions out there. They're really impactful because they're individual letters being set by individuals versus like one chunk of signatures. One of the oppositions for the zoning reforms that we're talking about, they did a change.org petition and they had like 100 and some people sign it. But the way it was presented to the commission was it's one letter with 100 people signing it. And they kind of made a couple little comments here and there, but it was very much just like a single item. And then all of the letters that we sent in were listed together as a single item.
Hmm.
So like
Steve,
as individual items.
I'll go ahead and
If that makes sense.
Stephen Muskegon, I wonder if I could actually ask you a question before kind of going back to questions for Anna and
Yes.
Andrew. I'm curious, like as a former elected official who may have been on the receiving end of a letter writing campaign or multiple letter writing campaigns,
Right.
are there things that you can think back to from your experience where like a campaign was like more effective versus less effective because of how it was run, or maybe the contents of the pieces?
The veracity of what was presented, but whether it was individual or multiple signatures on one letter, I think it was the content was most critical. But if you see 100 signatures of individuals that around town, I mean, it's going to have an impact.
Mm.
Whether you agree with them or not. But and I would always take as much time as possible in the ensuing weeks to reach out to as many people as I could on the topic. So we're going to be going into getting a letter ready to place before the city commission on zoning reform in November.
Hmm.
I did, this old mayor did end up back on the planning commission in April. And the planning
Just when you
commission,
thought you were out, they dragged you back in.
I know it. Yeah, it's it was kind of a surprise. But anyway, uh, 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 the planning commission approved and has moved our approval to the city commission for theirs,
Hmm.
which is final. But our local group, knowing some of the personalities on the commission, even though they seem supportive now, over the past 3 to 4 years, we're always cognizant that the same 5 people can scare some of those commissioners and torpedo something. Chuck was in town Friday
Mm-hmm.
in Muskegon, and I don't know if he ended up watching the planning commission meeting on YouTube or had heard, but the first quip, from him was, "Hi, Steve. Do you think you need any additional community outreach and input because you've only been at this for 9 years?" And uh, yeah, it was quite funny and uh, to the point of being sad.
Mm.
Um, because like again, I mean, it literally is the same 5 people.
Mm.
Um, and their arguments don't hold any water. And these are people known to us, and but they just don't, they have their own reasons, and actually, I think they're fairly selfish.
Mm.
But we're gonna, move forward and hopefully with the letter and getting as many of our 50 members to, sit in the audience, and I'll make a 3-minute remark, and then on a hidden cue, they'll all raise their hands and say, "Hi, we're from Muskegon Strong Towns," so it won't be chicken crap. So, um, but we are hopeful.
Mm.
Uh, And yeah, I'm getting I have regular contact with city staff too because they like to pick the old man's brain
Mhm.
because of the history. So uh, hopefully we can get this through, even though maybe it's not as robust, but it is reform and it is a heck of a lot more flexible.
Mm.
And we would be getting rid of the R's, the R1. Um, and single family housing requirement, residential requirement. So we're keeping our fingers crossed.
Wow. Yeah, that's a big day. Big day. David.
John, real quick to get just 2 comments as a currently a councilman for La Plata,
Right.
Maryland.
Yes.
Steve makes a great point, and I would just add something slightly different, and that is we had a public hearing, which is different, but you still have 3 minutes to talk, right? And so we had this a year and a half ago, a huge PUD that was amending their master plan, so it had to come before us to change it. And there was a lot of opposition by the current residents who lived there. Okay. And regardless of that opposition, and half of them I know, and that's fine, like Steve said. But what really made a point with me, and I think, and I can't speak for the other 4 council members, but for me, they were well organized because they had one spokesman who kind of talked for all of them, but they had a packet, they had a letter that was that laid out very clearly who they were, where they lived in the community, and how long they had lived there, and the reason why they were opposing this amendment to the original master plan because it's a PUD master plan community. Now, granted, about 80% of them had to do with the HOA association and the ownership, which the town doesn't have any sway over. But the other issues were very valid points about for me, and that's why I voted against it, was because there's only one way in and one way out. That's kind of dumb when you have over 200 and something units. But my point being is that they were the letter was very effective because they had graphics. They referred to the zoning orders. They referred to the developers agreement. They referred to the HOA documents. It was very good. Unfortunately, uh, it passed 4-1. I was a lone vote against it. The other related issue that Stephen talked about is very important as well, is uh, trying to get. Oh yeah, no, I mean I forgot. I want to go back to your website, Anna, because I'm on it
Mhm.
now, and your lesson or your how to engage the city commission, because we have the same format at our town council meeting. We meet 2 or 3 times a month, and we have an agenda item, public comment. And I'll be blunt, it is so disheartening because I can count on one hand in 3.5 years how many people have used that. No, not a heck of a lot, to be honest, blunt about it. But your template here, if you don't mind, I'm going to use it and create a template
Mhm.
for us, and I'm going to send it out on my Facebook page and make it part of a podcast that I do as well, because folks get intimidated by just 3 minutes and they figure why bother. So I want to publicly say thanks a lot. That's a great tool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I put a link to their website, but here's the page in question that he is talking about. It is really cool.
Before we did our city commission meeting, we actually had a mock city commission at our general meeting, like the general meeting before. And so we invited people to come and speak at our general meeting for 3 minutes, and we had like a timer where we timed them and then made suggestions. So that way people could get comfortable with the public speaking aspect of speaking in front of city commission. And so it was super fun. We didn't have like a large turnout because we were asking people to public speak. So not our biggest meeting, but it was definitely like up there in one of the fun meetings that we've done. And if we do it again, we'll definitely be partnering with more organizations to see if we can get more people to come and practice speaking in front of like a city commission.
That is
Great.
such a fun idea.
That's a great idea.
Mm.
Wow.
But I think
Thank-
people don't realize that 3 minutes goes really quick, especially if it's a big topic. So you really got to have your points really concise.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, you do.
Yeah,
Now, I was
there-
hoping in our situation, except for rampant timidity on the part of some of the commissioners. Um, yeah, anyway, it should be a slam dunk. I mean, we ushered in form-based code in our commercial district in 2015. We expanded it as neighborhood context into one of our larger near neighborhoods to the downtown and into a second neighborhood. My second participation as an alumni in the Mayor's Institute for City Design, a massive study and, professional engagement from us, university professionals and everything, working right up from the time I, didn't get back in the office, but it's never enough, even though we would, have, three engagements, but, we're heavily vested with our 15 recognized neighborhood associations. We get out there and, the mayor and one of the current commissioners abstained at the planning because they didn't want to seem that they were jumping on it because the newsletter didn't get out and because we're not legally required to notice all 38,000 people, in town that we're doing this, even though we've been putting it out there for 9 years. And then, Chuck gets to be a comedian and asks me if I need any more, engagement. No, it's great. It should be a slam dunk because, like Anna, we can present the city's own really good research,
mhm.
and, hi, Commissioner, I'm just going to replay, the presentation and I'm going to hand out a copy of, the housing trap to all of you. And Chuck was just in town and we went through this with Ted Landsmark, when we did the Institute, it's like, more, but we'll back it up with our friendly faces, promising not to be jerks and move forward.
That's great. And Andrew, have you found that there are particular types of issues that lend themselves particularly well to letter writing campaigns versus others that might not?
So I think on the couple of examples that we've done for letter writing campaigns, the first being Corewell Health's special
Yeah.
amendment
Hmm.
for a parking exception. That was it's the developing corner of the town, and Corewell has bought up a bunch of buildings. They're trying to do a big, nice campus there, basically, with the multi-phase development. Now, we kind of looked at that and went, chances of that multi-phase development happening pretty low over the years. So they needed a special amendment to put in a parking lot, basically. And we kind of went, well, you're going to take the parking lot out in like stage 3. So why even put it in? If they already have a parking structure built. So that was one where it was like, we kind of looked at the development plan and went, well, this just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And they got to ask the planning commission for it anyways. Let's write a letter campaign against it. A couple of them that we've written in support of are some other like development properties within the city, and even in like Wyoming, that were slightly lower AMI housing developments that probably needed some support just because of the location they were in and the possibility of having some support or some people detracting against it and saying, yeah, we don't want that here. So we kind of threw some letters together for those just to build up that support for those, just to make sure that those passed. And then the other examples, the zoning, those were a no-brainer because there was plenty of opportunity to give input on that over the last year and a half. So pushing it through in the last stage there, just to make sure that the city commission knew what the people of Grand Rapids kind of wanted. That was kind of important, I think. It made it go smoother through the city commission, I think, as well. I don't know. Andrew, do you have any?
I would say know your audience of like who you're asking to write those letters. So there are stuff like we probably wouldn't get a whole lot of traction in letter writing within our like base membership. And that's just how it is. That's general advocacy in a nutshell. And then know who you're writing the letter for. And so like when we did the planning reforms, we had one commissioner that was kind of on the fence. And so we wrote our letter, a good portion of our letter directly dedicated towards answering her questions and her worries and what she's
Nice.
been vocal about.
Yeah.
And so we targeted that to
Mhm.
really be able to clear up and reshape the way she saw the reforms and who they were helping. And when in her like speech of like why she was excited for these reforms, she quoted our letter. So like we knew
Smart.
we had a good impact of that because again, she's quoting our letter. We know we're reading it and we're talking to her, which is a great thing. But we won't be able to get a letter like a lot of people super excited about writing a letter campaign over like a new bus stop in the middle of nowhere. Like our membership just won't be excited to do that. Where these like larger projects, I mean, we're talking neighborhood changing projects like Corwell or citywide reforms like the zoning reforms. Even sometimes like small developments within neighborhoods that need a little extra support. And you get 5 or 10 letters to those, and like they're going to be passed through easily, even if they have a lot of amount of people coming out and being like, hey, we don't want this here. Especially when in a city like Grand Rapids where we have such a need for housing. And the biggest like pro tip of letter writing campaigns is if you're supporting something and being positive about it, you need less letters than if you are being negative and going against something. Because
Wow.
these commissioners always hear something negative. Your
Mm.
positivity and your support for a project is going to be more impactful because it's odd. It's not the usual that they normally get. And so being positive and engaging in your letters and having facts and figures, like how Anna has presented so far, is going to be more impactful, and you actually just don't need as many there. And so when you only get a couple of letters, like don't fret. A couple of letters might just be all you need to push it over kind of move the needle a little bit and get the project through.
Mm,
That's
that's really good.
that's great. Yeah, thank you all for doing this, and for Anna and Andrew for your advice, and Stephen, David for your expertise as elected officials has been super helpful. We're in the process now, so I'm a leader of a local conversation in Lower Marion Township, just outside of Philadelphia. And we're in the process now of trying to get past a proposal to build a central civic space where there is an existing 72 space parking lot right in the heart of our downtown. It's like the design is beautiful. It was a huge compromise. They ended up just with the like design being able to keep out of site-wide 112 spaces, half of those are maintained, which if you had told me that, 6 months ago, I would have been outraged that they were, keeping that many, but they incorporated them very well into the design, and they're flexible, so they can be used for market tents. I'll post a link to the design here in the chat so you can see it. But so 2 weeks ago, I guess October 1st, was a big public meeting where the final design plan was presented to the Board of Commissioners in Lower Marion. And there was 2+ hours of public comment, which was pretty evenly split between the opponents and the proponents of it. The opponents, they're, yeah, I'm sure you're already guessing what their argument is. You can't take away parking; that'll kill our downtown business. Very inconveniently for them, there is a huge parking garage with 172 spaces, literally like 200 feet away, that is virtually empty most of the time. So that argument doesn't really hold. But we're now kind of in this middle area where we following public comment, we saw a lot of the commissioners kind of like being receptive to some of the I feel statements that a lot of the opponents of the plan were putting out there, which made me concerned that that this is going to be dialed back, and which would just be an absolute tragedy. I feel like this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to really do something for the town that's going to be impactful for generations to come, right? So I'm now trying to figure out, okay, the next step is to try to get this to not be watered down, and what's the best way to do that. And we've been strategizing, we've definitely been talking to our commissioners to lobby them personally, and just kind of gauge where they're at, kind of do, take a roll call. But this has been really affirming that I'm absolutely going to go back after and push for a letter writing campaign to supplement our other efforts. So yeah, thanks again for doing this. This was super helpful, very fantastic, and extremely timely for me personally in my efforts here. Yeah, I just posted a link to the plan if anyone's interested to take a look. It's really stunning. I'm super impressed with what they're doing. So thanks again.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Craig. I really appreciate that. Thanks for sharing that link. Speaking of links, for the folks who are going to be watching this later, I will include in the description of the YouTube video some of the links that we've mentioned so far, including the one Craig just posted, and one on the article we posted on one of the hospital campaign that Strong Towns Grand Rapids did, link to their site, and some others. And then I was also, what was I gonna ask? Well, actually, something I was gonna affirm first is that there's a book by a sociologist named Hari Hahn. You've probably heard me talk about this a couple of times before. I mentioned it in the course. The book is called How Organizations Develop Activists. And what Hari Hahn describes is she distinguishes, she says really there are three types of advocacy groups, speaking very broadly. There are groups that mobilize, there are groups that organize, and there are groups that do both. She said groups that organize are kind of doing that very deep sort of transformational work. They're looking to make kind of quote unquote, new converts to the cause. It's very slow, but it's very deep work. Groups that mobilize are groups that are very good at getting a lot of people to do like a very low bar action. She said the most powerful and effective organizations are the groups that can do both. And I think that this is what we have seen you all do in Grand Rapids. Like you are good at the deeper stuff, the deeper, more transformational organizing work. You're also good, and that's the subject of this talk, at the quick mobilizations. And so I think for what it's worth, there's academic research behind like how effective you've been in Grand Rapids. Again, that book is called How Organizations Develop Activists. It is quite academic, but frankly, it was the most formative text, I will say, when we decided to kind of restructure the local conversations program a little bit beginning in January. We did it based, of course, mostly on what we saw you all doing and what was effective. But then we also learned a lot from Hari Han in that book. So just want to affirm that. And I don't know if you have anything to say to that about sort of how you find that balance, but it's more encouragement and affirmation than anything else. Anything that comes to mind for you, Anna?
I would say, our team doesn't really have any formal activism, education or experience, really. It's more of, we kind of looked at what the other nonprofits are doing in Grand Rapids. And a lot of them focus on, one core issue, and they're focused on how do we solve a small XYZ, and not so much well, we can solve XYZ, but what if we really just went upstream a little bit and really went after the source of what's causing XYZ. And we kind of approached it like that, where policy is not glamorous, but it does impact people. So let's start pushing on the policy stuff. And so I think we've kind of taken a different approach to maybe some different local conversations who are, do a street cleanup or improve a bus stop or that sort of stuff. We haven't done any of that. We've focused mostly on policy. So
Okay. Let's just take the hospital campaign, for example, where you had, 60 letters. I assume that that's more people than you have coming, to your regular meetings. And so you're getting people from outside your group to participate in this. As you said, Anna, like you're calling people to take action on this. Do you specifically reach out to sort of kindred spirit groups and say, hey, like, would you like to be a part of this campaign? How are you getting out the word beyond your group and to encourage other people to join in on the letter writing campaign?
So yeah, there's a lot of similarly aligned groups within Grand Rapids. We have the Bicycle Coalition. We have a lot of people who just like biking. That's all they focus on. So we have a lot of alignment there. Then we also did a little bit of a sprint with some of the housing advocates to try to find some people there that would be willing to step up and do more advocacy work versus solution-based work, to try to get a bigger voice that way. What are some of the other organizations we've used?
For Corwell, we had like a week. So our planning commission releases their agenda roughly 1 week out. So for Corwell, we had about 1 week. We leveraged social media to get the word out on that pretty aggressively. For the zoning reforms, we had a lot more time. So zoning reforms, we had a couple of months that we could work through, and we knew they were going to get through planning, and we could submit our letters to planning, and then we could resubmit letters to city commission. And so there we partnered with a few other housing organizations and other organizations within Grand Rapids, plus running some socials to get the support that way. We had that, we could get a bunch of letters, but to get people outside of our groups engaged, a lot of times it's collaboration with other organizations and then social media, and just using social media. The Corwell stuff took fire because Corwell is like local demon, but that one was easy. But if you can leverage your connections with other groups, and then again, if you're savvy with social media, it does not hurt.
Yeah, I would say Andrew and then our social media guy, David, have done a great job with our Instagram on just pushing out quality content to get people engaged and excited about some of the things going on in Grand Rapids.
That's great. I have a couple more questions, but does anybody want to sort of unmute or raise their hand and ask a question?
This is more of a comment.
Mhm.
I'm just glad that Anna, you're just down the highway.
Yes.
So I'll be getting a hold of you so I can meet with you weekly at the McDonald's in Coopersville, or
Is that
something
halfway?
around that.
That's about halfway.
But I hope you don't mind that I'll be making the contacts and inserting myself into your Strong Towns life because
Oh, go
aside from
ahead.
partnership and bending your ear, I would certainly appreciate the ongoing input. And besides, we both speak Michigander, so I think that's cool.
Yeah, no, we're pretty connected with Muskegon, so we are very excited to see what happens over there as well.
Yeah, that's great. Other questions or comments?
Yeah, this
Well,
is Nick
go ahead,
from
Nick.
Strong North Tahoe. So we've done a few letter writing campaigns here. We've taken a couple different approaches, and to the points of some of you, it seems like kind of the individual letters where each letter has unique content, yet it's kind of across the letters unified. Content seems to be the most effective at getting kind of influence, right? And so one of the biggest challenges, I'm not sure if you guys have had this, it seems like just getting members to actually take the time, to get over that fear of actually writing the letter in the first place seems like a big challenge. So I've been trying to do, set up some like simplified ways of doing that, using some of the, automation tools out there. I'm curious if any of you have basically played around with that. I know you can provide kind of like a ready to go template and say, hey, change the parts you want to, but I'm sort of experimenting. I'm just curious if you guys have any feedback or any other approaches. Because I would love to kind of, as I'm working on these tools, help other LCs as well.
Yeah, I don't know if the tool that you mentioned in the chat, Nick, is that shareable? Like, could I include that in the description too? I know it's kind of in beta. Like, I just interrupted the flow, and I apologize because you asked this great question. But maybe when Anna and Andrew are done, maybe you can describe the tool that you've been experimenting with. I apologize, Carly. Go ahead.
As far as automation tools for our members, I have not set anything up for members. I have a bunch of stuff set up in the background for us. But I think that the problem with the nature of the letter writing campaigns for us is we want it to come from someone else's email. And so I can't really, other than like a web page or web tool, having them send it from their email, I think is, if we can reduce that time down to it's copy and paste for 5 minutes and maybe edit, I think that's enough of a low barrier to entry and still getting good civic engagement. That people should, it's 5 minutes, take 5 minutes, send an email, do your civic duty of whatever public engagement is coming up. And yeah, I don't know. I've kind of felt like we've struggled with a similar thing where we have, a seemingly good number of people that are saying, oh, I want to get engaged. And I'm going, okay, so what is that level of commitment for you? Is that, maybe an hour a week of keeping up with things and sending out emails or something? Or is that like, oh, I just want to like be aware of the big issues and then help out with that stuff? And so I think trying to gauge that out of more specific members of your organization is probably something that could be done better. That way you can get a better level of engaged members versus maybe disengaged members. And how do you slowly build up that level of engagement within your group? And I don't
Yeah.
have a good answer for that right now. So
Got it. Thank you.
Nick, will you briefly describe this technology that you're working on right now?
Yeah, so to Anna's point, I agree. You'd want individual members to be sending letters from their own email address, or even mailing them in, right? So it's coming directly from an individual rather than a single email address, because then it really has that appearance of not just being one organization. It's like then the individuals. So the tool I worked on is kind of with my members in mind and some of these struggles we've had, which is like, hey, we write a letter, here's an example. And then people just some people are really good at that. They can quickly make it their own. A lot of people just go and they say, oh God, I don't even know what I would do to this. And then it just gets dropped. So the tool I created, it basically, you set up a quiz as an LC, right? Where you have your topic. We have an example on that link I shared where we have a big project to do like a beach rehab thing at the county level. So what it does is like basically provide a little context, and then that creates the quiz, and then members can go there. They fill out a couple things, how they feel about, certain questions like what would you like to see at the beach? And then once they submit that, basically then it spins that up into a letter that matches kind of the tone, the answers. It kind of uses what they provided there to then just draft a full-on letter that's now they can then make it their own more, or if they're happy with how it's been output, it's ready to be copied, ready to be emailed, whatever they want to do with it. So it's just kind of that attempt to make it easier for a citizen to engage that otherwise might get daunted.
Yeah, this looks really, really interesting. And I mentioned in the chat too that Nick and the Strong North Tahoe have created an AI tool on their website where if you can ask it questions, and I've used this even as somebody who doesn't live in North Tahoe. You can go in and you can ask it a question. Let's say I think I put one in about dollar stores once. Like what is Strong North Tahoe's take on dollar stores? And when you ask this question, it kind of gives like a general answer. Okay, Nick, I'm explaining your tool. My understanding was that like it kind of gives a general answer, and then it gives kind of a strong towns answer, and then it like when possible like actually connects the answer to the city's own documents, uh which I think it's that third level that to me is just kind of mind-blowing. um and it really fits with what you're talking about with a successful letter writing campaign, Anna, like connecting it, like basically using the city's own words and aspirations in these letters can be so powerful.
Yeah, right on. No, that's exactly. Yeah, I love hearing it kind of explained back to me, but that's the idea, right? Is again, the way I view all this is that citizens want to get engaged, but it's daunting to get involved in the process. I mean, I tell the other members of my LC, I'm like, hey, I'm the dumbest guy in the room when it comes to knowing what's going on here. So I'm basically creating these tools for me, and others like me who don't have the years of experience working in local government. So yeah, in any case, I don't want to take over here, but just sort of throwing my hat in there and saying I'd love to, do I'd love to contribute to the efforts, at the various LCs with some of these tools. So happy for you to share, but also, with a context that this is very much an early rough prototype that I basically before this, I don't think I really shared it at all because I just kind of spun this up in the last few days.
Yeah, it's a really neat idea. It's really cool. I will definitely check the description below, and you'll see a link to this and the other ones that we've mentioned. Um, I just love how innovative you guys are, Nick. Anna and Andrew, I have one more question. I don't know if it's like the most compelling final question, but it was something I was curious about because we only have like 3 minutes left. Um, I was curious if most of this letter writing that other people are doing, if this happens kind of on the individual level, or if you ever do like letter writing events where people are in a room together, kind of working on it at the same time.
So we have not done a group letter writing session yet. That would be a fun general meeting to do.
I think I think the Birmingham group did something like that. Yeah, I'll have to. I think we did an article about that. If we did, I'll put it in there.
Interesting. No, we normally we'll designate someone to go write it, and then we'll all hop in there, review it, edit it, throw our opinion in there. And so it's kind of like a group project throughout the week, depending
Yeah.
on the time frame. So
And then I think what they did was like after maybe the template was done, then it was like part of their LC meeting, as I recall in Birmingham, it was to like now everybody kind of take it and make it your own. So I think, I don't know, as a writer, I think writing like in a big group sounds very frustrating to me. So I like how you're doing it. It's like a small, one person, kind of taking that first stab and then everyone making it better. So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Anna and Andrew, this has been it's been inspiring. It's been super informative. I'm just incredibly grateful for the two of you, for your group, that you took the time today, and just like in preparing the presentation. Any last minute thoughts that you might have to kind of take us out?
no, if you want to start a letter writing campaign, just go ahead and get a group together and start putting some thoughts on Word.
Yeah, this is really helpful. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you for shaping the conversation. These are all available, of course, in recordings, but I'm really trying to encourage people to come and like be a part of asking the questions and really shaping it. And so I'm grateful that all of you are here. Yeah. Oh, Carlos, that's great. We've had letters to the editor writing events that went very well. That's fantastic. Well, thank you all for being here. Thanks for all of the work that you're doing in your communities. And I hope you all have a good evening.
Okay, I'll be in touch soon, Anna.
Sounds good.
Thanks,
We're all meeting
John.
at the McDonald's in
In
Coopersfield.
Coopersville.
Yeah. All
Well,
right.
we can pick out something better.
All right. All right. See you later, everyone. Bye.
Thanks,
care.
everyone.